Really interesting. Thank you very, very much indeed.
All right, thanks, bye.
9 minutes now to 11. 5 Live from the BBC. It's the Nolan Show tonight. Approximately 700,000 people in the UK are affected by neurodiversity. That includes conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety. Is this increase due to a growing understanding and acceptance, or a rise in diagnoses? Charities working with ADHD and autism have also expressed concern over the growing number of individuals using short videos on social media to self-diagnose. Well, let's speak to Emma Dalmayne, an author of 2 books on autism. Good evening to you, Emma.
Good evening.
Good evening. You've got 5 kids who are autistic, so you've a lot of experience here. What is going on, Emma?
6 kids, 5 are autistic,
6
and
kids.
I'm autistic myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Emma, what is going on? Do you think the rise in diagnosis is a good thing because we're detecting the problem? We're detecting the problem of people not getting statements at early ages and people not getting help when they need it? Or what do you think is going on? Where's it at?
Well, there's the simple explanation for the rise in diagnostics is that more adults are now being diagnosed and the toolkits are now better. So they're detecting if a child is autistic a lot earlier, which can only be a good thing to get support in place.
Like, what was your experience? Did you get help when you needed it?
No, no, I didn't. My youngest son was diagnosed first, and then I was diagnosed after him. And then I looked at the other kids and thought, oh, because if it's your normal and you don't know any different, you're not going to know, that your child is acting so-calledly differently to others. So no, he didn't get any help. None of my children have got any help.
What
The
ages are
education
they?
department is broke, and they're not putting enough training in place for teachers. There's so many things wrong with it.
What ages are your children, Emma?
Oh, well, 31, 28, 24, 23, 15, and 10.
So let's talk about the couple of kids still in school. Are you telling me that
they're home educated?
because you don't want to put them in the school, or you can't, or you don't have enough support? I'm trying to understand how a child that hasn't had support is coping with the pressures of education. Like, it's outrageous your children haven't had support.
That's the thing. If they're home educated, they don't have all those pressures that school children have. So I was speaking to someone earlier and saying that in a school, no matter how good the school is, no matter how much they try, they can't make it less loud. They can't make the other kids more accepting. If you've got an autistic child who's in school, they're constantly having a load of noise. They're having to read facial expressions of other pupils, of their teacher. They're trying to formulate responses to questions they've been asked. There's loads of different smells. There's just so much for them to cope with, constantly bombarding them. Whereas at home, they don't have that. At home, it's a lot more settled and they don't have all these different people around them. And if they do need a break, they can go up in their room or they can go out on the trampoline in the garden. They can take that sensory time that they need to regulate and concentrate.
Listening to this tonight, Proffesor Nancy Doyle. Nancy's an expert in workplace adjustments for neurodiverse staff. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Hi. And hi, Emma.
Hi.
Hi.
So, neurodiversity, Nancy, that includes a lot of different conditions, right?
Well, neurodiversity means that, the whole of the human species has a kind of variety and diversity in the way that our brains work. There are some things that are kind of minority neurotypes, so they're less usual in the normal population, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and those kind of neurotypes we call neurodivergent or neurominorities. But we could include any brain that isn't a kind of standard, competent jack of all trades brain. When you've got any brain brain that has kind of big peaks and troughs in what we do well and what we might struggle with, and these kind of brains are more specialist. Any specialist brain could really be considered a neurodivergent brain. So it sounds a bit complex, and it's an evolving territory with the language changing. So I'd like to reassure your listeners that if they're a bit confused, it's because it is confusing. It's not because you've missed an important message. But
how good are we? And obviously it'll differ from company to company, from school to school, but how good are we as a society to embrace people and help them and understand that we're different?
We are better than we were. So I started working in this field 20 years ago, and I was a neurodivergent child at school 30 years ago. And I would say that we've got a lot better in the time that I've been practicing as a psychologist, but we still have a long way to go. And some companies, some industries are doing a good job. What we have now that we didn't have when I started this work 20 years ago is we have got best practice. So there are companies that are doing really good things and making the most of their staff and allowing their specialists and their generalists to thrive, which makes sense because that's a good team when you have a balance of specialists and generalists, and that's what some companies have really looked at and understood.
Let's take autistic people as an example. Rather than talking about their struggles, the disadvantages, what are the advantages of being autistic?
Autistic people have amazing attention to detail. Many autistic people have highly sensitive brains. They literally hear things more accurately, see things more brightly, feel things more intensely. And that lends itself to, a highly accurate level of perception where they can spot errors at 20 paces, they can do fine detailed work. And, traditionally we've always thought of that so far as being around technology and people that are really good at coding. But it also lends itself to inspections and compliance, to graphic design, to accounting. It can lend itself to whatever the autistic person happens to be particularly interested in. They will become incredibly good, focused, detail workers.
So the brain is sharper, is it? It focuses sharper, does it?
Yes.
It's like
That's right.
I don't know, it's like a lens which is focusing sharper.
And exactly like that. And in a world that has got increasingly loud, busy, bright and distracting, that has been very disabling for lots of disabled people, lots of autistic people. As Emma rightly pointed out a minute ago, the school system is a complete sensory tsunami for an autistic child. And a lot of workplaces are. Commuting is a sensory tsunami for an autistic person. So the big international experiment that we've had over the last few years, where we've realised that actually lots of people can work from home, has been really helpful for autistic people because it means that they're no longer challenged on whether or not they could deliver their job if they were at home some of the time rather than in the office all of the time. And that kind of thing makes a huge difference to some autistic people.
But for example, how could someone be a police officer and be autistic with all the noise, all the randomness around them? Could they?
Well, it depends what kind of police work they were doing, but actually there are lots of really good...
I'm talking about on the ground, out there on the ground.
Absolutely. On the ground, autistic police workers exist and they do a fantastic job. They are highly accurate in a crowd control sense because they can hear more accurately, so they can go into their hyper-focus mode and they can kind of triangulate different noises coming from all around them. And what a lot of people, autistic people will do, will go into a kind of hyper-focused state where they're really highly alert and paying attention. Now, what they will need is downtime between that. So it's not that they can't do the job, it's that will be quite overwhelming and stressful. So they need to really work on self-care and, the shift patterns have to be right for them and they have to get sleep.
I wish I had more time with all of this.
Yeah.
In fact, would you both stay on a few minutes for me? Would you do that? Because we've got to go to the.
I wanted to talk about language.
We've got to go to the news, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to go to the news now. But to be honest with you, I have no idea beyond the kind of very basic understanding of autism, and someone says that person's autistic, and I'm just finding it fascinating what you're both saying tonight. So maybe you can stay with me. Here's the number: 08085 909 693 is the number to call tonight. We'll take the news and we'll come back to this in just a sec.
Husky died when a statuette containing a
Know you, here is a gift from our team of artists.
that political correctness won't get men being held by the Taliban in Afghanistan.
We know that the Taliban, they have got...
Was the big winner at tonight's annual Olivia...
Or to go to drama school, who've been rejected...
to a referendum for...
Olivia Coleman.
So, Pip, are you in love?
Well, tonight on The Nolan Show, we've been revisiting the story of the British men who are reportedly being held in custody by the Taliban in Afghanistan. We spoke to Scott Richards of the Presidium organisation, who stressed the significance of the legal process in securing their freedom.
If we have an unclear judicial process that is understandable to the international community.
But it's been a long time getting here. We're nearly 20.
This is responsible for a decline in grooming convictions.
They haven't been able to deal with the absolute...
The Daily Mirror, guess who doesn't have...
.co.uk/5 Live. Stephen Nolan on BBC Radio 5 Live.
Before we turn to the front pages tonight, I just want to continue for a few minutes in our conversation we're having about neurodiversity, and Emma Dalmayne has written 2 books on autism. Proffesor Nancy Doyle is with us, an expert in workplace adjustments for neurodiverse staff. Emma, I wanted to spend more time because I know so little about this and I want to. And so when you and Nancy are telling me about how an autistic mind becomes overwhelmed with the sounds outside, like what is happening in your mind when that happens? Does it feel loud, or is it confused, or is it all these different messages hitting you at once? Help me understand what it is.
Well, first I'll say that the language around autism, some people use high functioning and low functioning. So I can explain how a sensory overload feels and just completely smash the misconceptions with low and high functioning. So I'm a mum, I'm a CEO, I'm an author, and I can manage quite well going shopping, looking after the kids and stuff. But if I get sensory overwhelmed, be it from a smell, it can be a smell from a chicken shop that I'm walking past, or, particularly strong petrol in a petrol station, something like that, or by bright lights, because I've got something called Erlin syndrome, I will be unable to be touched. I'll be unable to tolerate light, any sound at all. I'll be in my bed for 3 days minimum, vomiting, crawling to the toilet and back, and totally unable to look after my children. So would I then be low functioning? So that is how a sensory overload
It makes
feels.
you vomit?
Oh yeah, God, yeah. There's a lot of vestibular disturbance with my sensory overload, so it's horrible. You can literally feel every hair in your scalp moving. It's that sensitive. So.
And once the event happens that triggers that, how long until you recover?
It can be a day, it can be 3 days. It really depends on how bad it is. There is a trick that some people can do. I can do it sometimes. If I can catch it in time, I can try and redirect my senses. But most of the time, no, it can be triggered by crowds as well. So it's not an anxiety attack. It's totally different. It's actually all sensory based. And it can be really, really hard, which is why when you see children melting down in the street, or holding their ears and screaming, that's why ear defenders are advisable. There's something that do work.
And give me an example of some real experiences you've had as an autistic person, Emma.
Okay, so I went to party in the park about 15 years ago now, and it was a lovely sunny day. Everyone was, fine. We're having a good time. And I just started to feel really nauseated. So, I thought, right, I'm going to leave, and make my way home. By the time I got the second train, I was vomiting. And that took 3 days to get over. It can be very invasive, and it's taken as a part of autism, and it isn't. Sensory issues are completely separate. Some autistic people don't have many sensory issues, and sensory issues are something that I wish I could get rid of for myself, but there's a lovely part to it as well. there's so many different sensations with having heightened sensory that can be really nice. But
like
yeah,
what?
there are parts too.
Like what?
Like walking for me on really soft carpet feels like tickles, and touching a particularly nice fabric can feel like cold water running up my fingers. Walking on a rough carpet fills my mouth with saliva, which is horrible. I can't touch the back of the scratchy sponges when you're washing up because, again, water fills my mouth. Yeah, I'm a very tactile seeker. I like to feel things and touch things. But there, as I said, there are people. It honestly depends how it affects the individual. It's so different and so fluctuating. Sounds that would bother me may not bother another autistic person. They may actually seek that sound and enjoy it.
And why is that, Nancy? Why do different brains process different sounds? Is it about experiences in childhood, or why would certain sounds affect different people differently? Or is that just life?
Yeah, such is life. I mean, it could be nature or it could be nurture. I mean, when you have very sensitive ears, and when you're, or smells, and when you're, living in a body that makes you particularly susceptible to life events being quite traumatic, it is easier for autistic people to experience trauma, and those traumas can then be triggered and attached to certain sounds or certain feelings or smells or light intensities. But the brain is incredibly diverse. We don't have similar brains. As different as our fingerprints and our faces are, so are our brains. Our brains are mirrors of what we've experienced, but they're also they're also the result of genetics. And if you think about what we would have needed to survive in our more natural habitats of tribes hundreds and thousands of years ago, if you've got 150 people living together, you need one or two of them to be really good listeners and hear approaching bears or tribes. You need a couple of them to have amazing taste buds. So that kind of diversity that we have in our brains is an evolutionary advantage. It's how we're meant to live. But the trouble is that we've created very standardized lives where we're all expected to be jacks of all trades. We're all expected to be able to deliver a similar sort of communication and intelligence. And that kind of started around the years of the Industrial Revolution and the mainstream education system. And we need to move on. We need to socially evolve past the idea that all humans will be able to do all of the same things and experience all of the same in contexts in the same way, because it's just not how we were designed.
Or is it autistic people, or what type of neurodiversity is the person who is less likely to be socially aware of what is appropriate in terms of a response? So do the way some of us will... We will answer some questions with a degree of maybe insincerity or fakeness because we're trying to be polite. Is it autistic people, or is it people with other neurodiversities?
Lots of neurodivergent people will do that differently. So someone who ticks might tick an observational tick. They might say something about you that you think is rude because they've observed it, and then it turns into a tick. I'm an ADHD, I have ADHD, and I very often say things that are too direct, or my voice comes out too loud, and people think that I'm kind of cross or upset when actually I'm excited or enthusiastic. And so actually this affects all NDers in different ways. But I think the particularly example that you've given about social communication being different is one of the big diagnostic criteria for autism. But I should say that autistic people talking to each other don't have that problem. So what you could say is that neurotypicals need to think about how autistic people communicate, as well as constantly trying to get autistic people to communicate like neurotypical people.
But here's my question, Nancy. So if you're telling me that an autistic brain can actually focus better and is very, very sharp, is that? Can be. Why can that brain not be adept and flexible enough to add in a level of insincerity or politeness, or call it whatever you want? What's going on there?
Because it's a waste of time. It's not very efficient.
But if you wanted
politeness and sincerity.
But if you wanted to, could you? Or is that part of the condition that you can't? Is it choice or not?
For some autistic people, it's not choice. There's simply a kind of, I don't understand why you would want me to lie to you. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. Even if that's just to keep, some sort of pretend politeness. And for other autistic people, they could do it, but it kind of costs them quite a lot to hold all of that in.
Why?
Because it's not their natural way of communicating. But this isn't just about autistic and non-autistic. All the behaviour that we think of as polite is normed by our gender and our culture. I've got a dad who's from New Jersey and a mum who's from Berkshire, and let me tell you, what those two people call polite is incredibly different. And you ask my dad to sit quietly in the nice drawing room of his mother and father-in-law when he's the child of Irish Italian builders from New Jersey, and it's like sitting on his hand like a jack-in-the-box, and that's difficult for him. So your autistic person, your ADHD person, it's a bit like just being in a different culture and having a different language and constantly having to pretend to be someone you're not. That's why it takes effort and energy. It's just difficult to be out of culture all the time.
Finally,
walking
go ahead,
into
Emma.
a social situation is like walking onto a stage without the lines, without being given the script. It can be incredibly hard to try and formulate responses and think, oh, am I being too loud? Am I being inappropriate? Did I read that properly? Am I offensive? So it can be, social situations can be really hard for us.
Mm-hmm. I always
finally,
like to say that I don't feel like I have ADHD when I'm in New Jersey. I just feel like a normal person there.
Emma, tell me about the petition that you've started, 180,000 signatures. What's the petition for?
Oh, my goodness. I'm so glad you brought that up because I didn't know if I'd be able to speak about it. CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. It's the only way that you can get a prescription for anxiety or depression medication. It's the only way that you can get therapy, for a child or teen that's depressed or anxious or anything else. My son is 15. He's autistic, and he has been feeling very down, very depressed, and has had thoughts of hurting himself, but luckily hasn't acted on those thoughts. So we went up to the hospital to see his paediatrician about a non-related thing, and he happened to mention that he had been feeling very down, and she said that she would refer him to CAMS, and I said it wouldn't be worth it because they will not see him because he's autistic. So she said, no, they'll definitely see him. She made the referral. And I went up to support another autistic lady whose son had fallen from a bridge. And we were at the inquest. And when I got home, her son was autistic as well. And when I got home, the letter was waiting for me saying, what did they say? We agree that your son has emotional difficulties, but we do not believe at this time mental health services is appropriate. We also note that he has a diagnosis of ASD. So they wanted to post him to MASH, which is Children's Safeguarding, and Children with Disability Services. Neither of those, even your GP, cannot prescribe medication or, put you forward for therapies to do with mental health. So they turned him down because he's autistic. So I made a petition. It's now at 180,000. I've spoken to 2 parents whose children have actually died after being turned away from CAMS. There's no mental health support out there unless you've got money and you're willing to pay for it privately. And unfortunately,
it's a national crisis.
Yes, it is.
It's a national crisis, and it's a disgrace.
Yeah, kids are being referred over. The kids that are cutting themselves, that are considering killing themselves, and they're being told, well, you're autistic, so we can't help you.
My goodness.
And that's happening now in the UK in 2023. Apparently, if you're autistic, you can't have mental health issues. It's unconscionable. The amount of harm that's being caused is terrible.
It's the same for adults, but the difference for adults, they can at least go to their GP and be prescribed first-line antidepressants than their GP, but the children can't. Yeah.
Literally, the only option.
So what help is there then for children who are at crisis point?
There is no help
there
for
must
children.
Be.
No,
there must
isn't.
be help.
No.
Come on, there
look
must
into
be.
it, Stephen. It's literally families are travelling 500-600 miles for placement, and the only children that are getting placement are children with repeated suicide attempts, not children that are considering suicide. It is an absolute national disgrace, and it would be great if the BBC started reporting on how bad things actually are.
I think it's very, very important, and you'll both understand why I'm doing this, and it's really important that we do. That look, if you are listening tonight and you are having any thoughts around suicide, it is really, really important that you understand that there are ways to help you, that there are people to help you, that you should talk to people, and we'll give you an action line number and link in a moment or two.
That's the honest truth. Autistic child or teen.
Yeah, look, I understand. I do understand. This is your life experience, but I also want people to know that if they are feeling like this tonight, I don't want them feeling helpless, and I want them to reach out to someone and ask for help. Emma, thank you very much. Nancy, thank you as well. Really important subject for us to speak about tonight. bbc.co.uk/action line if you do feel that you need to go and find some information given what you've heard tonight. Okay, look, we'll have a look at the national newspapers now with Kate Ironside, Benedict Spence. Kate, good evening to you.